So, hello and welcome to my presentation on the Urban Climate Network of Bern, Switzerland. I'm from the University of Bern, and unfortunately, I cannot be here in person. So, very briefly about our Urban Climate Network in Bern. Bern is the capital city of Switzerland, has approximately 150,000 inhabitants, and has a relatively complex topography. We have mountains in the north and south of the city. We have the river that is incised quite deeply into the sandstone, and we are, even though we are in the middle of the Swiss plateau, the topography is relatively complex. The old part of the city, which you see here on this slide, is UNESCO World Heritage, so this limits the options that the city has for doing climate change adaptation, and this is also actually an interesting aspect of working in the city of Bern. And as you can see from this aerial photograph, we do have quite a lot of trees along the river, but then we also have the inner part of the city, which is, of course, medieval structured and has very much more has much more problems related to heat. Until recently, urban heat was not really a problem in the city. We rarely had tropical nights, for instance. This is something that came up only recently, but now it seems like the city of Bern is at the threshold where heat starts to become really a problem. We have studies on that, and therefore there is a strong demand by the city for information on a detailed level, information on where the hotspots are of the city, how we can change them, what the effect is of the trees, of urban parks, for instance. So since about 4 or 5 years, this is really an extremely hot topic, and with a lot of stakeholders that are interested, from the education department, because of the schools, to the health department, to of course all the planning departments of the city. A little bit of a history, which I personally think is very interesting. Namely, our institute did have an urban climate network already in 1972 to 1974, with approximately 16 stations, some of them air quality stations, some of them meteorological stations. At that time, the focus was not urban heat, but it was rather wintertime inversions, SO2 particles. It was about air quality, and at that time there was many big projects were planned, and the question was whether the ventilation of the city would still be sufficient, whether air quality would become an even worse problem. So this was the focus, but the stations measured year-round, and the data were written on paper 2-hourly, and we have digitized all these data. So now we have the opportunity to compare our present-day network with a network that existed 50 years ago. I think this is quite an interesting thing. The new network was actually started by a PhD student, Moritz Gubler. Some of you might know him. The first summer of measurements was 2018, and currently we have about 100 stations, of which 60 stations are like standard locations that we have every year, and then the rest is according to demands of the city. This can be specific projects. If they want to unseal a certain square, we put sensors there. This can be scientific interest. If we have a master thesis working on trying to make a transect or working on cold air drainage, then we install sensors for a limited time. Or this can be that there are changes in the city that force us to remove stations. So we have standard locations, and then we have other locations that change from year to year. The stations are located in the urban area of Bern, but also in the surrounding rural area, so that we can really map the urban heat island. The network is now funded by the city and by the Bern Electricity and Water Company, where they are also very interested in these data. And we have this means that we work on a 4-yearly schedule, but we hope that this will then become a permanent monitoring activity and that we can continue to measure for many years to come. The network is built up from low-cost sensors. They cost approximately 65 euros per station. So on the right, you see a photograph of it. We have loggers that measure temperature and in some stations humidity. You see the hobo loggers on the right side, and they are within a self-made screen radiation shield, which is made from camping gear. Actually, these are camping plates that you would eat your dessert from, so you can buy them. And this gives a dimension of 13 times 15 centimeters. And then we mount them on poles. Typically, we'll see this on the next slide. As I said, we measure mostly only temperature, and now we're starting to measure also humidity. At the moment, these screens are unventilated, but we have a new generation that we test this summer and hope to have in operation in the network next summer, which ventilate. They have a solar panel because actually overheating is only a problem during the day, and they have a normal PC fan that is incorporated, and so we have a ventilated screen next year. Currently also we have no automatic data transmission, so we have to visit the stations and download the data to a laptop. We have to do that every 6 weeks or so, which is quite time consuming, and therefore we don't want to do that anymore. But currently anyway, since this is a summer network, we have to mount the stations in May and take them down in September anyway. It's also good to visit the stations every once in a while because the city really changes and you can clean them, and so yeah. But from next year on, we have automatic data transmission with a LoRaWAN transmission. They will be ventilated with temperature and humidity, and because the costs of the sensors have come down, the costs will be slightly higher, but approximately same range of costs per station. And one of the things we want to do first things we want to do in the cost action fairness is to produce a video how to assemble such a station, what a list of parts that you need so that networks of that sort can be made very easily. So that's our first activity we want to do in this cost action. Now here you see how the network looks like in the city. Typically we mount our stations at existing poles. This can be light poles. This can, as you can see here, we have some special locations like in the bottom right where we measure over the water of the river, but typically this are on existing poles at an altitude of 3 meters above ground. This is to prevent vandalism, and in fact in the first year since 2018 we hardly had any vandalism, so we lost about as many sensors due to vandalism as we lost due to traffic accidents, and so I think this is a good thing. And as I said, we will have a major upgrade in 2023 when we will introduce automatic data transmission and ventilation. So far it's a summer only network. This might change when we have the automatic transmission, but so far the interest was really in summer, and the data are publicly available. You can download them from the website of the city of Bern. However, it's not real time, as I said, so only in late fall, when we have done the quality control of the summer data, we will upload the data for the previous summer. So in terms of the biases and the quality of the data, I know this is a busy slide, it's hard to see for you what it shows. We have several stations where we have ventilated thermometer stations operated by either Media Suisse or the local authorities, the city of Bern or some others, and there we can compare. And what we find is we have a daytime warm bias. Depending on the meteorological situations, this can be up to 1 degree, even a bit more in some situations. So this is not very good. However, we can model that bias quite accurately. So we can build an error model based on solar radiation and wind speed. And this explains us like 90% or 80% of the error variance. So we understand the error. We understand that it is due to insufficient ventilation in situations with a very strong solar heating. During the night, we have a very small temperature bias of maybe 0.2 degrees, so that's quite accurate, and therefore we need to ventilate our sensors only during the day. Now just one map with results. What you see here is the first summer of operation of our network, which was a heat summer, 2018, and you see the number of tropical nights. In the top, the northernmost station is Zollikofen. That's the official station of Meteo Swiss. And at that station, actually, I live in Zollikofen. At that station, we didn't have any tropical night in that summer. But if we go to the interior of the city, we have 8 to 9 tropical nights in 2018. So you can see it's really a threshold effect. We're really at that threshold where we have no tropical nights or many tropical nights. You can also see in the interior of the city, we have the darkest colors. But as soon as you go into these slopes towards the river, where it's relatively steep and green, we already have fewer nights. So this is a very interesting map. I could point also to many other things on this map, local cold air drainage flows, but this is just the raw data. What we also do is we use these raw data to make temperature maps. This is just one example for a specific night, 29th to 30th of June, 2019 in that case, and using geostatistical information for land surface cover and using a land use regression model, we can model the urban heat island effect of the city of Bern. And we do such maps for every single day of each summer, and these maps can then also be used for epidemiological research relating urban heat to mortality or morbidity. They can be used for planning purposes and for many other applications. And this is something we could also try to do for other locations in the fairness cost action. We also do other things. We also do numerical modeling of urban heat island, but I guess that's another topic I won't show here. What we would like to do in the framework of this cost action is to look at the networks from other cities, try to compare this with the city of Bern, and also try to make a link to land surface temperatures from satellites, as this has been done in other projects. We would like to compare this with air temperature measurements, because the urban heat island has quite a different structure and temporal behavior in the two. We also would like to make use of previous consortia within EU projects that dealt with urban climate or with urban problems, and try to link this to the cost action fairness. So that's all from my side. Thank you for your attention.